Oh my God.
Mama, I sent them Layla.
佢食過上面嗰啲就走，爸爸都未食完。
Hi.
KK right there, side. Don't you count leaves? Leaves have like a little. Oh no, that's what Bao Bao is. Those leaves that.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Smithsonian's National Zoo. My name is Marty. I'm one of the giant panda keepers here at the David Rubenstein Family Giant Panda Habitat. For those of you that are standing where I'm standing, this is Bao Bao. She is our 18-month-old cub, or almost 18-month-old cub. In the enclosure to your left, that is Tian Tian, that is her father. And in the enclosure to your right, that is her mother, Mei Xiang. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that everybody is in their own enclosures. This is actually new. We've been doing this now this is the third day of it. And basically what's going on here is, first of all, giant pandas are solitary animals. They do not live in groups. You're not going to see like a herd or a pack or whatever of giant pandas running around. They're very solitary. They do not live together in groups, and that's pretty much their whole life. The only times that you'll see animals together is for the very short time of year that the pandas breed with one another, or a mother and a cub. Now, obviously, as I just said, mom and cub are not together. And the reason for that is we're moving into the next stage of Bao Bao's life, which is when she will be independent. She will not be with her mother. In giant pandas, this occurs at about 18 to 24 months, and the data shows that females it occurs usually closer to the 18 months, and males usually closer to the 24 months. Bao Bao, being a girl, is more likely to be weaned at 18 months, and she will be 18 months in a few days. Or, sorry, what is today, the 19th? Okay, a week. So what happens in pandas is that Bao, obviously when she started her life, she nursed from mom. That is how all mammals survive when they're young, is that they get milk. And eventually the milk stops. It stops in people, it stops in every animal. But in pandas, not only does weaning mean that you don't get to drink milk from mom anymore, it also means you have to leave. Mom chases you off. She does not want that cub around with her anymore. It's not that mom's being mean, she's being a panda. That's what giant pandas do. The reason that she does this, we believe, is that it's gene dispersal. It's a way for her to move the cub outside of the territory that she and the father might be in. So if you think about it, as I said earlier, pandas are solitary. Tian Tian over there has never been in the same enclosure with Bao Bao. He has never done anything with her. He doesn't know who she is. That's not what it means to him. In his mind, once he's bred a female, he goes on his way. He has no role at all in rearing young. So he potentially, if Bao Bao, say, stumbles across him when she reaches her mature years, he would see her as a breeding partner. You do not want dad and daughter breeding with one another. You start to get genetic inbreeding. And because pandas aren't people, they don't have this sort of social taboo. We have built into the way that we live that's not right, we shouldn't do that. Well, giant pandas don't have the same thing. They don't think the same way we do. So a lot of animals that have this sort of solitary life where mom lives in a territory where the dad might be, but the dad doesn't really take care of the cub, it seems that one of the ways that they deal with sort of the possibility of inbreeding is that the mom chases the cubs away, and that gets the cubs to leave the area where their parents are found. So what we believe is going on is that Bao Bao is being moved out by her mother in order to sort of avoid accidentally breeding with her father. And it also makes sense if you think about it. If this was a boy, and Mei Xiang's only other surviving cub, Tai Shan, he is a boy, you don't want him staying in mom's territory because, again, later on in life, when they stumble back across one another, they might try to breed with each other. So again, this sort of idea of moving the animals outside of their natal territory is sort of a biological, sort of instinctual way for the pandas to avoid an inbreeding situation. So what we've been doing starting on Monday, and today's Wednesday, so we've been doing it now for 3 days, is that May and Bao Bao spend the entire time that keepers are here apart. So this morning we separated them. We put Bao Bao in yard 2, which is the yard just out behind her. And then once we finished cleaning inside, she got access into enclosures 2 and 3. And Mei Xiong went out to yard 3, and has now access into enclosure 4. And again, we're doing this until about 1:32, at which point we go ahead and put them back together for the night. So for the most part, the 2 bears have seemed to have no issue with this. Yesterday, for about 20 minutes, Bao Bao she wandered her yard, and it seemed like maybe she was trying to figure out what was going on. We gave her some more to eat, a couple things to do. It's called enrichment. We gave her some items to interact with, and she then had a great rest of the day. Today, actually, Mei Xiong seems to be the one that's slightly on edge. Now, whether that's because she's separated from her cub or there's something else going on, I can't tell you that. I can't get in her mind. We will treat it the same way. We just continue to try to give her opportunities to have things to do. So extra feedings, toys to interact with, those sorts of things, to try to get her to be happy and to kind of settle down. Yesterday, actually Monday and Tuesday, Mei Xiong took a nap, so she didn't care at all. But today she just seems a little bit more on edge. I will tell you that she is potentially starting to move into her breeding season. When pandas start moving into their breeding season, they get a little bit more restless. So no matter what you do, they're kind of raring to go. They're not necessarily going to slow down. So again, probably today by 1:32, we'll try to have the cub here, Bao Bao, and her mother back together. They will then stay in these 2 enclosures overnight, and then tomorrow morning the keepers that are here will do the same thing, separate them for a while. Our next step will probably be to start having keepers stay a little bit later and try to extend the time that they're apart. And ultimately, we're probably looking at no more than a week to 2 weeks before Mei Xiong and Bao Bao are completely separated and they will not be together again. It seems strange. I mean, look how small she is. She's not even half size of the adult. But this is what happens in the wild. We're not doing something here that doesn't occur with these animals naturally. We actually don't even really know what the mechanism in the wild is. Nobody has been able to study wild pandas and see how exactly they do this weaning. We do know roughly the ages because we see these animals independent of their mothers, but we don't necessarily know exactly how they're separating themselves from mom. So the 2 theoretical ways that it could happen is, one, very abruptly. So say, 2 years go by or such, 18 months to 2 years go by, and then suddenly mom says, I'm done with you, and chases the cub off. Or, and this is the way that we tend to think that it goes, it's the way that most zoos operate when they separate pandas, we believe that it probably occurs a little bit slowly. So what would probably occur in the wild potentially is mom says to the cub, hey cub, I need you to leave for a little bit, and the cub then runs off into the woods. Well, this is the zoo. There is no woods for that cub to run off into. And what happens sometimes in settings like this is if the cub doesn't have anywhere to go, the mother starts to get more and more agitated. In essence, she's saying to the cub, think about it with your own child. You tell that child to do something to go away from you, and the child doesn't. What happens? You start to get more agitated. Why are you not listening to me? So consequently, that could be the same thing that is going on with these guys, and I have seen that in other animals, in other bear species and some other animals that I work with, where the mother starts to get agitated because the cub, in essence, is not listening to her. So we need to be, as keepers, part of our job is to try to interject when these things arise, and that's why we have to physically separate them. There's really no other way for us to give them opportunities to self-separate. They will self-separate, but there are times where they won't. And again, Mei Xiong might get frustrated. We obviously don't want Mei Xiong to hurt Bao Bao. That is not the goal of this. The goal is to let Bao and Mei sort of slowly separate from each other until such time as Bao is ready to be on her own. Now ultimately, usually the mother is a little bit more ready than the cub. That again makes some sense. Think about when, again in people, you kind of want to get your kid out of the house. It might take a little bit of coaxing to get that child out of the house, and then you feel a little bit happier, and maybe the child is like, why am I leaving the house? So the same thing might occur with pandas, that Bao Bao potentially will be the one to be a little bit more upset about why am I not with my mother. although as you can see right now, she doesn't seem to really care. She has been a very independent cub from the moment that she really could start moving. I was not here with Mei Xiong's other cub, his name is Taishan. But there are two keepers that spend a lot of time with him that still work with our pandas. And they both have said, without a doubt, Bao Bao is much more independent. She has always been a little bit more willing to do her own thing, kind of get into stuff on her own, and not necessarily always need to be around her mother. Whereas Taishan kind of was more of a mama's boy. He needed a little bit more interaction from mommy. He didn't like it when they started separating, so it was a little more traumatic for him. Bao Bao, as I said earlier, occasionally she's got these little bit of things where she wanders around a little bit, or she kind of wanders the yard. Maybe she's looking for a mother, maybe not. Again, I can't get in the head of a giant panda. I can't tell you exactly what she's doing. We try to read them as best we can, but obviously I'm not a panda, so I don't entirely know what's going on. But there hasn't been a lot of issues with separation right now. Obviously, as we try to extend the time over the day, or the day that we finally shut the door and it doesn't open again, that might be slightly different. Like the first time Bao Bao has to spend the night alone, she might not necessarily really like that. But we'll do, that's my job, is to be here and to work with her and her mother as much as we need to try to keep them happy and try to get them through this time. It is part of, again, what needs to occur in this species. It's very natural. It's a natural process that we artificially help with because we're a zoo. We can't be, we're not nature. We can't do things exactly the same way it would happen in the wild. So I'm going to sort of stop there talking about weaning. If anybody has any questions about that or anything else, you can ask me at the end. The one thing I do want to talk about really quickly is what makes pandas very special. So giant pandas are technically bears, meaning they are in the order Carnivora. Do any of you little kids know what carnivore is? What's a carnivore? A meat eater. Does that look like meat that's in there with Bao Bao? Or Mei Xiong or Tian Tian? Nope. That's grass. It's bamboo, which is a type of grass. Don't feel strange if you didn't know that bamboo was grass. I had no idea until I started working here. So pandas are a carnivore that are almost exclusively herbivorous in the food that they eat. So biologically, anatomically, they're very carnivore, but dietarily, they're very herbivore. And that leads to almost everything you need to know about giant pandas. So because they're a carnivore that's eating plant matter, they're not super efficient at digesting it. And grass in particular is very difficult to digest. So because they're not super efficient at digesting it, pandas spend a lot of time eating. Upwards of 13 to 16 hours every single day doing nothing but eating, because they have to eat a lot of it to get the nutrients out of it that they need to maintain their health. That works out to, in the summer, 50 to 70 pounds of bamboo per day per adult bear, and in the winter, 100 to 120 pounds of bamboo per day per adult bear. So it's a lot of bamboo that they're eating. It works out to about 40 to 50,000 pounds of bamboo a year just to feed 2 adult pandas, and now we have a third panda, so it's going to be even more bamboo just to feed these guys. The main reason for that, again, as I said, is they're not very efficient at digesting it. Their digestive tract is actually more bear and carnivore than it is herbivore. So they have a very rapid gut transit time. Gut transit time literally means the amount of time it takes a piece of food to move from the mouth and come out the other side. In giant pandas, that's about 6 to 8 hours. That's incredibly fast. Most true herbivores spend upwards of 24 hours digesting one meal. But giant pandas spend less than a day, less than 12 hours trying to digest this one meal. So, and again, that's why they eat so much food. The way that they digest the bamboo at all is that they have bacteria that lives within their gut, and that bacteria actually breaks the bamboo down to start with, and then their gut can then begin to absorb some of the nutrients. But again, that's why they have to spend so much time eating. So this leads to a super obvious question, which is, why in the world are giant pandas eating grass if they're a carnivore? If they're not super efficient digesting it, if they're not, really well built for it, why are they doing it? And there's a number of theories. There's, I've read 10 or 15 theories easily, but there's 2 or 3 that show up in lots of public places. So I sort of personally believe that they're the ones that make the most sense. The first theory is that giant pandas were outcompeted by another carnivore. So at some point over their history, this is a species that's estimated to have been around for over 1 million years. Possibly there are other animals that were just better at being carnivores. So in their original habitat, they used to be found in most of China and a lot of Southeast Asia. They would have been found with lions and tigers and sloth bears and leopards, and maybe there's even some extinct animals that were better at being carnivores than a panda. So theoretically, they got outcompeted. There were other animals that were better at eating meat. The pandas couldn't get enough meat, so they had to change to eat something else. Now this change didn't occur overnight. It was a gradual process. So the second part of the theory is, if you're not able to get the food that you normally would have eaten, which is meat, what are you going to eat? Well, bamboo grows literally everywhere in their habitat. It's all over the place, and not many other animals consume it. So it's this massively available food source. And the third theory is kind of the one that ties the two together. If you all have carnivores at home, and I'm betting a lot of you do have carnivores at home, you probably have a cat or a dog at home, is that right?
Yep.
Many of you? Have you seen your cat or your dog eat grass? Right. So carnivores seem to already have an innate ability to consume some grass. So again, it's not inconceivable that over a long time, not like overnight, but over 1 million years or so, pandas went from being primarily a carnivore that consume a small amount of leaves to primarily a herbivore that eats a little bit of meat. And in the wild, these guys do still continue to eat meat, although most of it is carrion, meaning already dead animals. Excuse me. But again, generally speaking, these guys are almost exclusively herbivorous. And that leads to a lot of what you'll see with pandas is either eating or sleeping. That's pretty much what they do all day long. If you're eating this low nutrition food, you're not super adapted to digest it, you don't want to expend a massive amount of energy, so you're not going to see them running around all day. However, they are bears. The adults can run at top speeds of 30 to 35 miles an hour. They can climb from the ground to like 50 feet off the ground. I've seen them do it in 2 to 3 seconds, and they do that by literally, no pun intended, or sort of pun intended, bear hugging the tree and just kind of working their way up it, and they can do that, again, from the ground to 50 feet off the ground in 2 to 3 seconds. They're big animals. They're very strong. They can be very fast. And if they need to, they will. But their coloring actually is their best defense. The leading theory as to why they're colored black and white is that it's camouflage. Now that sort of seems strange how the world does black and white work in a green environment because they live in a bamboo forest. The way that we think that it works, the mechanism by which we think it works is if you look into any forest, you're going to see areas where the sun comes through and areas where there's shadow. So presumably the black and white breaks up into that black and white, sort of the light and the dark areas of a forest. And I can tell you when Bao Bao was a lot younger, and even now, she likes to climb a tree. When she gets up into that tree, sometimes it's very difficult to find her. The other thing to remember too is that these guys are found primarily in the mountains in central China at elevations of about 3,000 to 6,000 feet. So they spend a lot of time in the snow. So that black and white probably helps them to break up into the snow a little bit as well. So their main way that they defend themselves is to hide, to avoid being observed. If they're seen and they can run away, that's their next defense, is to take off. But if they're backed into a corner, they are a bear, and they can turn into very aggressive, very strong, very nasty animals, which is why you will never see us in with our adults. And up until the time that we wean Bao from May, which again could be in a week or two, you might see us in with Bao Bao, but we are going to come to an end on that. She now weighs over 86 pounds. So even at this size, if she really wanted to, she could probably hurt one of the keepers. But we've been going in with her since she was about a month old. So she's never shown any real aggression towards us. But at some point here, weighing the cost-benefit analysis, we've deemed that by the time she's separated, she's going to be large enough that if she did decide to go after us, we wouldn't be able to fight her off. So that's why we're going to make the decision that probably, again, in the next week or two, we're going to stop going in with her. But you will never see us in the enclosure with the adult bears. If you do, please dial 911. We've made a bad mistake. We need some help. Because they are big animals. They can take a 3-inch diameter piece of bamboo that's this thick, put it into their mouth and break it in one bite. Now, if you've ever been around a piece of bamboo that thick, you know how much force they're generating. And in fact, I've seen humans break bamboo in the same way pandas do it. At San Diego Zoo here in the United States, they have 2 adult pandas that are much older than our pandas that have some bad teeth issues. So they really want to make sure that they break up that bamboo for them so that they don't hurt their teeth. And they do that by using a hydraulic press. That's the way that humans break bamboo. pandas do it in their mouths. And if they can do that to a piece of bamboo that big, imagine what they can do to me. So that's why you won't see me in with them, hopefully. Again, if you do, I need some help. So that ends my talk. There are lots of other topics, but I try to keep it to a few topics as we go along. But if you all have any questions, I can take a few questions before we need to move on. I saw your hand earlier.
I've been noticing that Bao Bao has kind of been sniffing at the door and going in that door trying. And is she trying to get to her mom?
That's a possibility. Her mother is in an enclosure that's separated by about 20 to 25 feet, but scent is their main form of communication. And also her mother, right now, last I saw her, was a little restless. She might be hearing her walking around, and she may be doing some calling. Pandas use a call called a bleat, and if you push the button back there, there's a bleat call. It sort of sounds a lot like a goat or a sheep. That is their contact call. They use that primarily to talk to other pandas. They're saying to other pandas, hey, I'm in the area. However, our pandas have learned to use the bleat to talk to me. So they start bleating. Sometimes it sounds like I'm saying bleeding. Bleating. They don't bleed, hopefully. Bleating. When they bleat, sometimes they're doing that at me. They want to let me know that, hey, I need to be fed. Where are you? The other thing is, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a black mark on that door, which is what she walked up to and sniffed. I actually watched her do it. That is a scent mark. So giant pandas' main form of communication is scent marking. They have something called anogenital glands. So in their kind of butt area, they've got these glands that they wipe on a surface. And by doing that, they leave a scent behind that other pandas can then determine the sex, the age, the relative size, health status, reproductive status. There's all sorts of information in that scent. Well, that is a scent mark that has been left there minimally by Meishong and her previous cub Taishan, and maybe even Tian Tian, but even possibly by, what are their names? Xing Xing and Ling Ling, who were pandas that were given to us in 1972 and lived here until 2000. Xing died in 1999, Ling died in 1992. Those scent marks were started by those pandas. So it's possible Bao Bao is even smelling two pandas that were here 40 years ago, possibly. So if you watch, there's multiple areas in their yards that have that kind of black. You'll see that it's very much darker than the other surfaces, same surface area. That is their scent marks. So to me, she wandered up to that. It's possible she's listening to her mother, but she also was checking out that scent mark.